Welcome to another episode of Insights with Ovations. I am your host, Aaron Ellis. We love to showcase the talent on our platform, let you get to know them a little bit on a personal and professional level, and also spend some time having them share some of their insights and their expertise and how they can apply to your organizations. Today, I am joined by Tina Greenbaum. She's actually a personal friend of mine, so I'm actually excited to have this conversation. Tina is a keynote and TEDx speaker. She's a peak performance advisor and a trusted psychotherapist to entrepreneurs and executive teams. Now, over the course of more than 4 decades, she's advised people from Silicon Valley executives to entrepreneurs, Wall Street bankers, athletes, artists, dancers, actors, and more. Literally, she spans the spectrum, and she really works with the elite of the elite. And I think that's important. And I also want to well, first of all, welcome, Tina, because I could get going there. Welcome.
Thank you.
I really want to start with the one thing that I think is very valuable about you that has been unique and that has you stand apart is the fact that you're also a psychotherapist, but you're also a very well-renowned coach. So how did you bridge that, and how do you take that forward into your work with organizations?
What a good question. So as a psychotherapist, we're trained to diagnose illnesses, mental illnesses, anxiety disorder, depression, all of those things, bipolar disorder. And at the same time, we work with the unconscious because the unconscious drives everything. And so coaches, in my experience, are very goal-oriented, behavioral-oriented. So it's not an either or. It's really about where this person is in their life and what it is that they're looking for. And what I say is I can go AC/DC. If we've got a lot of these things that are handled and we're only looking at a certain piece, we work with those kinds of behavioral kinds of things. Goal-oriented. Coaches, in my mind, are teachers. And I am a teacher at heart. And so the way that I started to transition is, and this is what I did my TEDx talk on, was I wasn't being effective. My traditional psychotherapy training was working with women who had very serious eating disorders, and they just weren't getting well. So we could talk about their mother, their father, sister, brother, but nothing was happening. And it wasn't really until I started to discover this mind-body connection by studying, how do I get under the hood, which is the name of my podcast. It's really under the hood. How do we get there so that your experience of your life is different? Because again, we can talk, but the body gets triggered before the mind. So just a combination of things, what works. My kids were great athletes. One of them went to the, tried out for the junior national soccer team, played in college very seriously. So I used to say, I don't know a lot about soccer, but I know a lot about psychology. And so the sports psychology, the neuroscience, just a combination of things. I only cared about what works. So if you need this, we'll go over there. If you need that, we'll go over there. And by this time, I've been doing this now for 41 years. I have a very, very, very deep toolbox. So
that totally makes sense. Now, my question to you next then is, how do you bridge that, what you just shared, to use your quote in the title of your podcast, to go under the hood of leadership in organizations and corporations?
Well, organizations are macro versions of the micro of the individual. So when I'm in an organization, there's a theme that's going on. If there's some kind of dysfunction, behavior runs in patterns. So again, whether it's the individual or whether it's the organization, behavior runs in patterns. So we look for the dysfunctional patterns, and those are the ones that we want to work with. We don't really want to touch the things that are going really well. Those things we kind of leave alone. So it's like you're already good, things are great, but how can we make this organization better? What are the areas that need the kind of help that I offer?
Perfect. One of the areas that I know you also specialize in that I'm extremely passionate about, and I've been extremely passionate about it for a couple decades, yet it's becoming widely more embraced, and there's a lot more openness to it than there used to be, especially, and I'm not aging either one of us, but even growing up in more of a corporate culture and more of even an interpersonal culture where it's like personal and professional were separate. I know one of your specialties is you integrate the personal and the professional. How have you been doing that when you go into an organization or work with like C-suite leaders and whatnot?
So I have a little triangle in one of my talks. It's my signature talk. And what we look at first is the individual in the organization, right? So let's say that you're a member of the C-suite, you're the CFO or the CTO or the CEO or one of the. So you spent a lot of time in education, learning your skills, honing your skills that brought you to this place. And then the next time you take these skills and you put them into a strategy. How am I going to get from here to here? So it may be climbing up the ladder, it may be, doing all kinds of things. And this is where most businesses spend all of their time. Okay, the skill and the strategy. But there's a third leg of the triangle, and that's the mental side, which drives everything else. Right? So if we have an organization where there's a lot of conflict, difficulty communicating with one another, high stress environments where people get short with one another, that's the area where we start with the individual within the group, and the group gets to work together. So if you and I were in a group together with different people that are in this organization, we would start with the areas that we want to focus on. And then my training as a group leader, again, this goes back to my early training, group dynamics, I can pull together the themes of the group, and then we know what to work on.
Can you expand a little bit on how the integration of personal and professional leads to peak performance and improving relationships with teams?
Well, again, everything starts with the individual. What goes on between here and me is what I project out into the world. And so if I want my instrument, and I call this an instrument, your mind and your body and who you are, we can fine tune, just like the athlete fine tunes their mental side, their physical side, their emotional side, all mixed together. So we take this person and hopefully they're interested in personal growth and self-development. I always say, what would be more interesting than studying you? Many times people think it says, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. There really is nothing wrong with you. What I teach, I always say, is common knowledge. It's not common practice. Mm-hmm. And so good mental health is not a natural sport. It's a learned sport. And so we learn these skills of peak performance. I always say that if you were an Olympic level athlete or a high performing dancer or performer, anybody on stage, you would no sooner go out there to compete without training this side than the man in the moon. And yet we put people into all kinds of high stakes environments with no training.
You just said, correct me if, is this what you just said? You said good mental health is not a natural sport, it's a learned sport.
Correct.
That is a totally different perspective on mental health. One of the topics that has been coming up a lot in organizations we've been talking about is mental health. They may not come to us saying we need help with our mental health, but through a few conversations, we realized, especially the human resource departments, and even in the sense that they're looking to either cultivate or hire people with more soft skills. I keep hearing that term. So can you speak towards your experience with that and your thoughts around that?
Some people have a natural tendency towards emotional intelligence. I didn't even know that it wasn't termed anywhere along the time, until Daniel Goleman came along and made that up, that emotional intelligence. So great leaders frequently are highly skilled in emotional intelligence. But it doesn't mean that people can't learn those skills. Now, I'll give you for an example. I'm working with in an executive coaching position with a young man who is being groomed for the C-suite. And they came to me and they said, this guy's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, systems and everything. He can hold all this stuff. But we don't know if he has leadership capability because his emotional intelligence and his empathy level is kind of low. And so we've been working together we're just hitting 6 months. And the transformation is thrilling, absolutely thrilling. This is a guy that was just all in, he said, I suck at this and I'm terrible at this and I'm terrible at that. And we have been learning skills, how to listen better, how to communicate better, how to do what we call executive presence. What does that mean, executive presence? that you walk into a room and people pay attention. Well, how does that happen? Sometimes you don't even have to say a word. And so all of these skills are teachable. I live in just outside of San Francisco now. So I lived in DC, so I worked with a lot of lawyers. Then I lived in New York, actors, dancers, performers, financial people, heads of banks, all kinds of everything. Now I'm out here and it's tech. Well, tech is a lot of engineers. And we're all human, and we all have parts of us that are more developed than others. So if this young man did a Myers-Briggs test, for anybody that's familiar with that, he would be very, very high on thinking, on the thinking scale. And the intuitive scale, kind of not so much. But we've been working a lot on his intuition. So, I can trust that. Oh, yeah. So we can learn these skills, and they are not necessarily natural to everybody. And even those of us with high emotional intelligence, my goodness, there's a lot of skills to learn.
100%. I've always said there's always more than I don't know that I don't know. And
right. So we think about mental health. We frequently think about illness.
Yes, correct.
Right. And so if we talk about mental wellness as opposed to mental illness, even people with mental illness need the same skills. They may need some medication to keep them, kind of on board, or the depression. We have treatments for depression. We have treatments for anxiety. So it's not that people are not well. They just don't know. They don't know how. And this is the thing I really want people to understand. And you understand this really well. It's not that people don't want to get well. And it's not that they don't want to get better. They don't know how. Mm-hmm. The unconscious, by its nature, is unconscious. So how do I access this part of me that's driving the train and I don't even know how to get to? So that's the kind of work that I do, is really in very simple ways, bringing people sort of into the body, like, where do you feel that? And it might sound, kind of hokey dokey. No, it actually, we have a whole universe here. And the way that I kind of got started through all this, the coaching piece is, if you don't have access to this, you're like a talking head. And the head is only thinking.
Yeah.
Got the feeling.
Wow, I love this. Now you spurred a thought in me too. One of the universities we're working with is actually we're working with them to curate some basically cohorts for students that are getting ready to graduate, so they can have these soft skills. They can have at least an understanding and expand them a little bit before they have the actual personal experience, because it's not something that's been traditionally taught.
Right.
Yet one of the universities is really actually looking to have that at least exposure to their seniors that are getting ready to graduate. How would you approach that?
Well, that's where my program, Mastering Under Pressure, would fit perfectly, because I teach these peak performance skills. It started out as, it was called Tennis to the Max, where my husband teaches tennis and I was teaching tennis players the mental side. And then people started to ask me, could you take this into business, or could you take this here, or could you take this into my sales team, or you could take, so Mastering Under Pressure, I teach focus, relaxation. Now, it's not just sitting in front of the TV and relaxing. It's actually being able to engage the nervous system to calm down in an instant and change the nervous system to the calming one, as opposed to the one that's in high anxiety. So focus, relaxation, dealing with negative self-talk. And what I do, I don't call it positive thinking. I call it productive thinking. Do my thoughts produce something useful for me? So it's a whole part about belief systems and the cognitive work. We talk about visualization, how to visualize, create something in your mind before it actually happens, or going back after it happens and replaying it, and then dealing with fear. We have a lot of fear in this country. We have a lot of fear, a lot. And so there are ways to manage it, to invite it, to look at it, to learn from it, as opposed to our tendency is to go like that.
Yeah.
So anybody that would be equipped with these skills would be well equipped to go out into the world.
So you just noted that there's a lot of fear, and that really goes on to one of the questions I was going to ask you, which is actually something that you've written that I'm curious on if you can expand on. You said that with the global political, economic, and environmental situations in such turmoil, New perspectives and skills are required at every level of our existence. And then you go on to say, you and your company can achieve extraordinary results. What do you mean by that? Can you give me some practical application of what you mean and how that leads towards those extraordinary results? I think it's very on top of what you were just sharing.
Well, if we start with the concept that we're coming from a place of scarcity, we're coming from a place of fear. Every decision that we make, every decision is always about how we're going to get screwed, basically. Right? So we could spend a lot of time on that. And yet we want to look at how are we going to win. And winning doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm moving towards a goal that is a goal that I want to reach. And if we focus on that, I'll give you an example. You know, as a psychotherapist, we have to have malpractice insurance.
Mhm.
And every year or every couple of years, we have to take another legal, you know, kind of course to make sure that we're not going to get sued. Now, some people specialize in that. I find that very, very dark. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on those courses. I don't really want to keep protecting myself and protecting myself. No, I want to look at how do I do damn good work, you know, and let that be my guide. And if I get sued, well, I have malpractice insurance and I'll deal with it at the time. So it really is a perspective. Where are we going? What are our values? What are our ethics? What's our mission? What's our purpose? And how can we bring an organization and that culture to actually be in alignment so that we are a force? It's not just one person. And it doesn't mean that we're not diverse and we don't have diverse issue, you know, kind of thoughts and ways that we operate, but that we are all on the same page in terms of where we're going. And that's powerful.
Yeah, very. So it's basically the way I've heard it said before too, is like playing to win rather than playing to lose.
Exactly.
And really
We don't want the
focusing on,
last race to the bottom.
yeah. And focusing what you want to expand rather than, you know, and focusing on what you want rather than what you don't want. Now, that goes into actually one of my other questions I was going to ask you, because I know a lot of times in the last handful of years, well, more over the last decade, it's gotten less and less for me over the last handful of years. But every time I go in and talk to organizations, they're like, "Well, we just want skill set talk. We don't need mindset work." But every skill set talk I did always bridged into mindset, and every mindset talk I did bridged into the skill set. So another thing I took about what you said, you say you proposed a question. And you said, do you honestly believe the skills and knowledge that got you where you are today will be enough to get you where you want to go? I think that is a great question. And I would love to have you speak on that a little bit and how you actually assert that question when you're working with organizations and people.
Well, organizations as individuals go through different growth development stages. So if you take somebody who's just starting out, they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. You know, a 12-year-old can't know what a 25-year-old knows. Nobody likes to hear that, you know, wait until you get to be a certain age. But the truth is, for every stage of development, we need people around us that have that level of experience to help us rise to the next. You know, it's the same thing. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want people to be smarter than you so that they can pull you up and take you to that next level. And that's the way it is, you know. So do I want to stay with the same group? Well, if we're all, you know, it's kind of like when I started, what I could afford is not what I can afford now. And the people who I can afford now, who have the expertise, can take me to that next level. This person who was just starting out themselves, like I was, we were kind of at the same level. So I'm always reaching. I always want to be, you know, have somebody who's been there before me, knows more than I do. And it also helps me relax because I'm really an expert in what I do. I'm not an expert in what you do. And I don't want to be.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. That really makes a lot of sense. I thought that was a brilliant question when I read that today. So, final thought that you could leave people with, if you had to sum it up in a nice little 20, 30-second snippet for me, what would that be?
It would be that the work that I do, and I didn't make all this stuff up, I just integrated it in a certain way through my personality and my training, and my interest. But if you want to be really, really great, you have to keep learning and you have to keep growing. And the human condition, we all come from our own history and our own perception. So my answers are coming from my history. Your questions are coming from yours. And if I keep holding on to the things that I learned as a kid that no longer work for me, I'm going to be kind of spiraling downward. So if I want to keep growing, I have to keep learning. And personal growth, transformational growth, growth is as an individual, as a company, I keep going like this because it's that looking inward to be able to bring out and manifest what you want. It doesn't come the other way. Everything gets filtered through us. So if this is a high functioning, high performing machine, then that's what we bring back to us.
Looking inward to be able to manifest and bring forth what's without, I think is the way you phrased that. I would really recommend that everybody goes back and re-listens to our conversation with that in mind, looking at it from that internal purview. I think that I honestly, I can see the congruency in everything you said, partially because I know you, but two, in basically summed up in what you just summed up, literally it shines throughout our entire conversation. So Tina, it's always a blessing and an honor to speak with you. I always enjoy our time together. So those that are listening, you have just been on another episode of Insights with Ovations. I've been joined with Tina Greenbaum. If you are more curious about Tina, you can go to Ovations and look over on the site. We can bring her to your organization around leadership, human resources, health and wellness, mental health. She literally spans the spectrum, and she's definitely an expert in her field. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.